The stars of the farthest reaches of space were a beacon of hope and wonder for Ilara Drace. The human girl from Earth had always been captivated by the vastness of the universe. As a child, she had dreamed of one day being a part of the cosmos, exploring its mysteries and uncovering the secrets of ancient worlds. That dream had led her to the Galactic Exploration Program, an initiative that sought to send humanity's brightest to distant stars in search of knowledge. Her journey had not been an easy one. The weight of the responsibility she carried was immense. As humanity's first representative on a grand stage of galactic politics. Still, she had felt proud. She was on a mission to find answers. Answers about the universe, about the ancient species that once inhabited the galaxy, and about the long-lost technologies they had left behind. Ilara had never expected that her quest for knowledge would lead her to the discovery of something beyond her wildest imagination. The ship, Argonaut, was a sleek, advanced vessel designed to traverse the farthest regions of space. Built for long-term exploration, it had become a home to Ilara and her crew. They were the first humans to venture into the uncharted space beyond the outer edges of known territory. The region, known as the Scintillant Expanse, at least according to every recorded map in the galactic databases. There were whispers of strange phenomena in this space, glowing nebulae, distorted gravitational fields, and the occasional faint signal that didn't match anything in known data. Some even said that the Scintillant Expanse was cursed, a place where the laws of physics did not apply, and where many ships had gone missing without a trace. Ilara had believed these stories were nothing more than myths, tales to keep explorers cautious. But as her ship drifted into the heart of the expanse, she began to question everything she had ever believed. The moment it happened was subtle at first. The ship's navigation system malfunctioned, an eerie glitch that sent a ripple of tension through the crew. The stars ahead shimmered strangely, their light bending unnaturally. Ilara had always been able to rely on the Argonaut's sensors, but now they were completely useless. The ship's systems flickered like candles in a gust of wind, and a constant low hum echoed throughout the vessel. Something was happening, and it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. "Ilara," said Kieran, the ship's chief engineer, his voice strained. "I can't make sense of the readings. It's like the fabric of space is folding in on itself. I've never seen anything like this." "I see it too," Ilara responded, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're in the right spot. This is it. The source of the anomaly. Keep scanning. We need to know what we're dealing with." Kieran nodded grimly and continued to work at his station. Meanwhile, Ilara stood before the viewing panel, her breath catching as the swirling light outside intensified. It was beautiful in an almost terrifying way. Colors and shapes that had no name, defying every rule of geometry and physics. And then, as quickly as it had begun, everything went dark. For a split second, the Argonaut was suspended in absolute nothingness. There were no stars, no sounds, no light, just void. The crew sat frozen, staring at their monitors, unable to comprehend what was happening. "Is this a black hole?" Kieran asked quietly, his voice tinged with fear. "No," Ilara whispered. "This is something else." Before anyone could react, the darkness was replaced by a bright flash, followed by a sharp, violent shockwave that rattled the ship's frame. The crew was thrown from their seats as alarms blared, and the ship lurched violently in every direction. Ilara could barely hold onto the console as her vision swam and her head spun. The ship stabilized, but it was clear that something had changed. The strange energy field had passed, but the Argonaut was now in a completely different part of space. The stars around them were unfamiliar. The nebulae they had once thought were distant were now close enough to touch. "What? What just happened?" Kieran asked, gasping for breath as he pulled himself back into his seat. Ilara stared at the new star chart that blinked across her screen. Before they could process the full scope of the situation, a new signal appeared on their scanners. A weak, static-filled transmission. It was faint, but unmistakable. Ilara's curiosity burned brighter than her fear. "Put it through." The static cleared for a moment, and a voice came through, echoing with a strange melodic undertone. It was not human, and it was not a language Ilara recognized. "Are you the human, seeking the artifact?" the voice asked. The hairs on the back of Ilara's neck stood on end. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and intrigue. "We are the Chiver," the voice responded. "We are the keepers of the ancient knowledge. We have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Ilara asked, confusion growing in her chest. "Execution against public donor funds," said Simon next to her. "For you," the voice replied. "For the one who will unlock the gate." Before she could speak further, the transmission abruptly cut off. Ilara sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do next. Kieran spoke up, his voice hesitant. "Do you think this is a trap? Who were the Kafar? What do they mean by unlock the gate?" "I don't know," Ilara said, her mind racing. "But that name, Kavar, it rings a bell. Let's see if we can trace the signal. If they're still out there, we need to find out more." The ship's scanners began to sweep the area, tracking the source of the transmission. But as they did, something unexpected occurred. The Argonaut systems began to behave erratically again, as if something was actively interfering with their technology. The ship shuddered as if it were caught in a gravitational wave. Ilara quickly input commands, but it was too late. The ship's communication systems went down entirely, leaving the crew in a state of suspended panic. "What's happening now?" Kieran demanded, his face pale. Ilara was about to respond when she was interrupted by a sudden jolt, a violent tremor that sent them all reeling to the ground. The ship's hull groaned under the strain, and alarms screamed throughout the vessel. And then, before anyone could react, the very stars themselves seemed to shift. A massive structure appeared in front of them. It was not a ship. It was a station. A colossal construct, made of materials that defied understanding, glowing with strange symbols and energy fields. It was unlike anything the human race had ever encountered, a monument to an advanced civilization that had been lost to time. And it was clear that this station was waiting for them. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. "This is it? This is what we've been searching for." But as they approached the station, a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the ship's interior. "Welcome, human. We have been waiting for you." The voice came not from a speaker, but from the very walls of the Argonaut itself. It was as if the station had reached out with an intelligence of its own, a sentience that had been dormant for eons. Ilara's heart pounded. "Who are you?" she demanded. The voice did not answer directly. Instead, it offered a single directive. "Come, discover the truth, or be lost in the dark forever." And with that, the station's gates slowly began to open. The crew was faced with a choice: enter and learn what lay beyond, or turn back and risk never understanding what had happened to them. But there was no turning back. They had crossed into the unknown, and the answers were now within their grasp. Ilara, her heart filled with both dread and excitement, made her decision. "We enter," she whispered to herself. "We find the truth." The Argonaut drifted silently, its hull groaning as the massive station loomed in front of them. It was a structure that defied all logic, its surface covered in shifting patterns of energy and geometries that seemed to fluctuate as they watched. No part of it adhered to known principles of physics. Its contours bent and twisted in ways that made no sense, like a living thing. The surface gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, a black metallic sheen with veins of shimmering blue light tracing intricate lines across the enormous structure. The crew of the Argonauts sat in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the station. Elara Drace, the youngest and most curious member of the crew, felt the weight of history pressing down on her chest. The discovery was profound, and her mind raced to process everything she had learned in the past few hours. The voice that had spoken to them had claimed that they had been waiting for a human to arrive. But why? What had brought them here? What was this artifact the Kavar spoke of? The answer seemed just beyond reach, tantalizingly close but shrouded in mystery. She knew they couldn't turn back now. The event that had ripped them from known space and thrust them into this strange region of the galaxy couldn't be ignored. The Argonaut's sensors were offline, its communication systems crippled by an unknown force, and the crew had no choice but to follow the enigmatic signals that had drawn them to this place. There was no going back. "Elara!" Kieran's voice broke through her thoughts. He was the ship's chief engineer, a wiry man in his 30s, with a keen sense of problem-solving. His face was pale, his brow furrowed in concern, as he scanned the control panels in front of him. "We need to be careful. Something about this station is warping our systems. The signal, it's getting stronger." Elara turned to face him, her expression grim. "I know. I've been monitoring it too. But the gate is open, and we've been invited. We can't leave now, Kieran. If we turn back, we might never understand what we've stumbled upon." "You're right," Kieran said, though the unease in his voice was unmistakable. "But I've got to warn you, we don't know what we're walking into. This could be some kind of trap. There's something about this place that doesn't feel right." Elara nodded. She understood the concern. The voice from the station had been unsettling, but despite the palpable fear in the air, there was something undeniable about the discovery. A pull, deep in her gut, that told her this was the moment she had been searching for. They were on the cusp of unraveling a mystery that could change the very course of human history. "No," Elara said softly, "but we have to take the risk. If the Kavar are telling the truth, and I'm not convinced they are, then this station might hold answers we've been searching for. We can't pass this up." Kieran glanced around the control room, his hands twitching nervously at his side. "All right, Captain. If you say so, I'll make sure we're ready to move forward. But I'm not going in there unprepared." "Agreed," Elara said. "Get everyone to the airlock. We'll suit up and make preparations for boarding. I'll be there in a few minutes." The crew didn't need much more prompting. Elara could see the looks exchanged between the officers. They were all aware of the risks. But they also shared her curiosity, the same driving thirst for discovery that had led them all to the stars in the first place. Soon, the Argonaut was ready for action, and the crew prepared for whatever lay beyond the vast threshold of the station. The airlock door opened with a heavy hiss, releasing a blast of cool air into the chamber. Elara stood at the front of the group, her heart pounding with anticipation. Her breath fogged the visor of her helmet as she took a step forward, her boots crunching softly against the dust on the ground. The station was quiet. Too quiet. The air was thick with an ancient stillness, as though it had not been disturbed for millennia. The walls around them were smooth and featureless, save for strange symbols and geometric patterns that pulsed faintly, casting eerie light on the surroundings. It was as if the station itself was alive, watching them, waiting. The team spread out cautiously, their flashlights scanning the darkness. There was no sign of life, no movement. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the farther they walked, the more oppressive the silence became. Their footsteps echoed in the chamber, the only sound besides their breathing. "What is this place?" Kieran whispered, his voice filled with awe. He ran his hand along one of the walls, the surface vibrating slightly under his touch. "I don't know," Ilara said, her voice low, "but it feels like we're walking inside a living organism. This structure, it's not just a machine, it's something more." The team continued moving forward, the flickering light from their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. They passed corridors that seemed to stretch out endlessly in all directions, like a labyrinth. It was clear that this station was vast, far larger than they had initially realized. The walls, though seamless, felt as though they were shifting and expanding with every step. At the center of the structure, they found a large open chamber. It was unlike anything they had seen before. The walls here were covered in strange runes, glowing faintly in an iridescent green light. In the center of the room was a massive, circular platform, an altar of sorts. Upon it lay a large, crystalline object, radiating an otherworldly energy. The artifact. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine as she approached the altar, her eyes fixed on the object. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its form was both alien and familiar, its surface covered in intricate flowing lines that seemed to pulse with life. It was both a work of art and a weapon, an artifact of unimaginable power. "This is it," Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is what we've been looking for." Kieran, who had been cautiously trailing behind, stepped forward to inspect the object. His face was a mixture of wonder and fear. "I've never seen anything like this. The energy, it's unlike anything in our records." "It's not just technology," Ilara murmured. "This feels alive, like it's waiting." She reached out, her gloved hand hovering just above the artifact. The energy it emitted seemed to draw her in, calling to her in ways she couldn't explain. She hesitated for a moment, then touched it. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, a shockwave of energy coursed through her body. The force was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a violent surge that ripped through her senses. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she felt as though she were floating in a void, disconnected from time and space. The world around her twisted and warped, and she heard voices, thousands of them, speaking in a language she couldn't understand. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the energy dissipated. Ilara staggered back, her heart racing as the room seemed to snap back into focus. She gasped for air, her hands trembling as she looked at the artifact. The runes on its surface were now glowing brighter, pulsing with an intensity that hadn't been there before. "Ilara, are you okay?" Kieran's voice broke through her disorientation, and she nodded, though her mind was still reeling from the surge of energy. They whispered in unison. "I think I'm fine, but something's happening," Ilara said, her voice unsteady. She turned to face the team, her eyes wide with realization. "The artifact. It's reacting to me." Her eyes closed for a moment. "Is that normal?" Kieran asked, his voice laced with unease. "I don't know," Ilara replied. "But I think it wants something. It's like it's calling to me." As if on cue, the walls of the chamber began to hum with an increasing intensity. The air around them crackled with energy, and the entire station seemed to come alive. The strange symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and the floor beneath them trembled. "Ilara," Kieran shouted, "we need to get out of here." But Ilara was transfixed, her eyes locked on the artifact. She could feel it in her bones now, the power, the weight of ancient knowledge and technology pressing down on her. The artifact was more than just a machine. It was a doorway, a key to something far beyond her comprehension. She could feel the weight of its significance, the gravity of the choice she had made in touching it. "I can't leave," she whispered. "We can't leave." This is just the beginning." But as she spoke, the station seemed to grow darker, the hum intensifying. The walls shifted, closing in around them. Something was awakening, something ancient and powerful. The voices returned, louder now, crashing against her mind like a wave, and through the chaos, one voice stood out from the rest, clear and unmistakable. "Welcome, human," it said. "You have found the key. Now you must unlock the gate." Was that an artful gate or an artful gate? The air around them grew colder, and the artifact began to glow with a fierce intensity. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as the artifact in front of her began to pulse with a fierce, unrelenting light. The energy in the air around them crackled, suffocating, almost alive. It was as if the station had been lying dormant for eons, waiting for someone to activate it, and now that someone was her. She had never felt power like this, raw and ancient, surging through her veins. The voices, the Kathvar, whatever they were, still echoed in her mind, distant yet clear. Their words reverberated in her skull, the gravity of their meaning sinking deeper with every passing second. She felt helpless. You have found the key. Now you must unlock the gate." Unlock the gate. The words spun in Ilara's mind, and for the first time she began to understand. The artifact was not just an object of study. It was a passageway, a portal. It wasn't just technology, it was something far more complex. It was an interface between dimensions, between realities. And it had chosen her to open it. "Ilara." Kiran's voice broke through her haze of thoughts. She looked around to see the crew frozen, fear etched into their faces, their eyes wide in shock. "Ilara, we need to get out of here, now." Kiran's voice was a sharp command, but it was laced with desperation. The ground beneath them shuddered, the floor plates vibrating, as if the very foundation of the station was shifting. Something massive was moving. Something ancient. Something powerful. But Ilara didn't move. She couldn't. The artifact's pull was too strong. "Ilara, please!" Kiran grabbed her arm, but she barely felt his touch. Her entire focus was consumed by the artifact's radiant glow, the pulse of energy that seemed to reach into the depths of her mind, unraveling the very fabric of her thoughts. "Ilara, you must listen." The voice rang through her consciousness again, this time with more urgency. "The gate will not remain open for long. The process has begun. You are the one who will usher in the next phase. You will be the key that opens the path." The voice was not comforting. It was not a plea. It was a command. And Ilara knew she had no choice but to obey. "Okay." Kiran was still pulling at her, but she yanked her arm free. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Everyone had heard the same voice, felt the same ominous presence in the air, but only Ilara seemed truly willing to embrace it. She could sense their fear, and she could feel their resistance to the unknown. But there was something in her connection to the artifact, that demanded she continue. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with awe. "This is what we've been searching for. It's the answer we've been waiting for. We can't go back. Not now." Kiran's face twisted in frustration, and he opened his mouth to protest, but he was cut off by a loud grating noise, like the creaking of metal and the groan of ancient machinery. The entire station began to shake, a deep rumbling vibrating through the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the temperature in the room dropped, a cold, unnatural chill seeping into their bones. The lights flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the walls. And then, without warning, A massive door opened at the far side of the chamber with a resounding thud, revealing a dark corridor that stretched endlessly into the distance. "The gate is open," the voice said again, its tone full of finality. "You have been chosen. Come. You are the key." Elara hesitated for only a moment, her gaze flicking to Kieran, then to the rest of the crew. Their fear was palpable, but their curiosity was undeniable as well. It mirrored her own. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. This was the discovery that would change everything. "Elara, don't," Kieran pleaded. His eyes were wide with desperation, but there was an undercurrent of something else, something he had never expressed before. Fear. "Whatever this is, it's not worth risking our lives over." But Elara had already made up her mind. "I'm going," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the decision. "If we don't understand what's happening here, it will consume us. We can't leave without knowing. We'll never get another chance." Kieran's lips tightened, and he looked to the rest of the crew who were silently watching, waiting for a decision. Finally he sighed, shaking his head. "Fine," he muttered, "but you'd better be ready to face the consequences." Elara nodded, her expression firm. She turned away from him and walked toward the open door, her boots echoing on the metal floor with each step. The crew hesitated, but one by one they followed, stepping into the darkness of the corridor. There. The farther they walked, the more Elara felt the pull of the artifact, its energy coursing through her, urging her forward. She didn't know what awaited them at the end of this passage, but she knew one thing. They couldn't turn back now. The corridor eventually opened into another chamber, much larger than the first. It was a vast, spherical room, with towering pillars reaching up to a domed ceiling. The walls were lined with strange consoles and holographic interfaces that flickered with fading lights. In the center of the room, suspended in midair, was a massive, swirling vortex, a dark, rippling gateway that seemed to pulse with the same energy as the artifact, and beyond it, something indescribable. A figure stood at the far end of the room, a towering being wrapped in robes of shifting light. Its face was obscured by a veil, but Elara could feel its presence, immense, ancient, and infinitely knowing. "Elara Drace," the voice boomed, reverberating through her skull. It was both inside her mind and around her, as though the being were speaking to her very soul. "You are the one who has come. You are the one who will open the gate." Elara's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer, the others trailing behind her, their faces pale with awe and fear. The being extended a hand toward her, and she felt a surge of recognition deep within her bones. "The gate," it continued, "is not merely a doorway between spaces, but a passage through time itself. You will unlock the knowledge of the ancients. You will wield the power that shaped the galaxies. But with that power comes a cost." Elara's eyes narrowed, her pulse quickening. The being's form shimmered, as if it were made of light itself, its voice carrying an eerie finality. "Once the gate is unlocked, there is no going back. Time will fracture, and all that has been will unravel. You will not be the same. You will be changed." Elara's heart pounded, her breath shallow as she tried to comprehend the enormity of what was being offered. But she already knew, she could feel it in the depths of her being. The artifact, the station, the being before her, it was all leading to this moment. This was why she had been chosen. She was the key to a greater truth, a truth that lay beyond the confines of space and time. "I accept," Elara said, her voice steady but filled with a fierce determination. "I will open the gate." The being did not speak again, Instead, it stepped aside, allowing Ilara to approach the vortex. The air around it hummed with a deep resonance, and she could feel the power swirling within it, beckoning her. The crew watched in silence as Ilara raised her hand toward the vortex. The moment her fingers brushed the swirling energy, the station seemed to come alive. The walls trembled, and the light flickered erratically. The ground beneath them shook, as though something vast was awakening, stretching across the universe. And then the gate opened. Ata Gate Walwit. Time itself seemed to stop as the vortex rippled outward, its edges blurring and warping. The air crackled with an overwhelming force, and the entire station was enveloped in a blinding light. Ilara felt a surge of energy, a searing heat and cold simultaneously, as though she were being torn apart and remade in an instant. Her vision blurred, and she could feel her very essence stretching beyond the limits of her body. And in that moment, she understood. She understood the vastness of the cosmos, the truth of the Kavar, and the power of the artifact. She was the key. She had unlocked the gate. But as she stepped through, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. There was no turning back.